For nearly 2 decades, Barron Trump existed in a space between two worlds. He was everywhere and nowhere at once. The son of one of the most powerful and polarizing figures in modern American history. Yet somehow he managed to remain an enigma. While his father's name dominated every news cycle, every dinner table argument, every social media platform on the planet, Barron quietly grew up behind glass. Visible but untouchable, photographed but never truly known. Now, at 18 years old, the youngest Trump is finally stepping into his own light, and what he's revealing is both surprising and, for those who paid close attention, entirely inevitable. The story of Barron Trump is not simply the story of a president's son. It is something far more layered than that. It is the story of a young man shaped by two profoundly different parents, raised in a gilded tower and then a national landmark, educated in elite institutions while being shielded from the very spotlight those institutions were designed to lead him toward. It is a story about identity, about inheritance, about a young man who absorbed everything around him and is now, slowly and deliberately, deciding what kind of person he wants to be. And what he has admitted, through his actions, his choices, and his rare moments of openness, challenges nearly every assumption the public ever made about him. From the very beginning, Barron William Trump's life was defined by contradiction. Born on March 20th, 2006, in Manhattan, he entered the world as the son of a real estate mogul and a former model, a child of extraordinary privilege who was simultaneously kept at arm's length from the very excess that surrounded him. His mother, Melania Trump, made a decision early on that would shape everything that followed. She would raise this child herself. No nannies, no outsourced parenting, no delegating the fundamental work of motherhood to household staff. In an environment where such help would have been not only affordable, but expected, Melania chose presence over convenience. She once stated plainly that she wanted to be the one there for him every single day, and by nearly every account from those close to the family, she kept that promise without exception. That decision matters more than it might initially appear. Because the values Barron carries today, the groundedness, the humility, the surprising absence of arrogance that has caught so many people off guard, did not happen by accident. They were installed deliberately, carefully, and consistently by a mother who understood that wealth without character is ultimately worthless. Growing up on an entire floor of Trump Tower's penthouse, surrounded by white marble and custom luxuries that most adults will never encounter in a lifetime, Barron was simultaneously being taught that none of it defined him. That is an extraordinarily difficult balance to strike. And yet, those who encountered him in school settings, on sports fields, and in casual interactions have consistently described the same young man: polite, kind, unpretentious, and genuine. The linguistic dimension of Barron's upbringing is one of the most quietly remarkable things about him, and one of the least discussed. While the world focused on his height, his fashion choices, and his famous last name, Barron was growing up as a multilingual young man in a household where 3 languages regularly competed for airspace. English was the language of public life and school. French entered the picture early, with Melania introducing it as part of a broader commitment to cultural education. But it was Slovenian, Melania's native tongue, that became something far more intimate than a linguistic exercise. According to reporting from Pulitzer Prize-winning journalist Mary Jordan, Slovenian became the private language of Barron's world with his mother. When the family lived in the White House, Barron, Melania, and her parents would hold conversations in Slovenian that the Secret Service simply could not follow. It was, in every meaningful sense, a language of belonging, a way for Barron to remain connected to a heritage that existed far outside the glare of American political life. His maternal grandparents, Victor and Amalie Janovs, were a consistent presence in his childhood, and Slovenian was the thread that tied those relationships together. Donald Trump, by various accounts, found this occasional exclusion mildly frustrating. But the fact that Melania prioritized her son's cultural identity over her husband's comfort in those moments says something important about her parenting philosophy and about the man Barron is becoming. At 18, the fact that Barron moves through the world with genuine cultural fluency, with the ability to connect across languages and backgrounds is not a small thing. It is the foundation of a worldview that extends beyond the walls of any tower or the borders of any single political identity. For much of his visible childhood, one of the most persistent narratives about Barron Trump was that he was simply a miniature version of his father. The resemblance was undeniable. Melania herself once affectionately called him Little Donald, pointing to his early comfort in suits and ties, his confident posture, the way he carried himself even as a young boy with a gravity that seemed almost inherited. Donald Trump has never been shy about expressing pride in that resemblance. He has spoken warmly about Barron's intelligence, his instincts, and a natural ease with which his youngest son seems to absorb the world around him. But the fuller picture that has emerged as Barron has grown older is more nuanced than simple imitation. Yes, there's his father's confidence, his father's presence, and a physical stature, reported at approximately 6 feet 7 inches, that makes him impossible to overlook in any room. There is an interest in business that clearly reflects the environment he was raised in, and sources close to the family have indicated that Barron has been spending time sitting in on meetings, exploring ideas in the technology sector, and actively laying groundwork for ventures of his own. These are not the moves of a passive inheritor. They suggest a young man who has observed, absorbed, and is now beginning to act with genuine intention. What the public suspected, and what Barron has now effectively confirmed through his behavior, is that he is not simply following a predetermined path. He is building something of his own, informed by both parents, but belonging entirely to him. The athletic chapter of Barron's story is perhaps the most honest window into who he actually is. Sports strip away the last name. On a soccer field or a golf course, you're only as good as what you can do. And those who watched Barron compete over the years describe a young man with real ability and, more importantly, real investment. Soccer was his first serious passion. During the years his family lived in Washington, D.C., he played for the D.C. United Youth Academy, eventually earning selection to their Development Academy U-12 squad. For a child growing up under constant security and scrutiny, the soccer field represented something rare and valuable, a space governed by merit rather than inherited status. Golf came next, or rather it deepened alongside the soccer years. The Trump family's relationship with golf is well documented. Donald Trump owns multiple golf courses and has spent more hours on fairways than most professional players. But for Barron, those rounds with his father were never simply about the game. They were among the most reliable father-son rituals in an otherwise unpredictable family life. Friends of the family observed father and son on the course long before Trump ever entered the White House, and they described Barron not as a child tagging along, but as a serious, capable player developing genuine skill. That consistency, showing up, practicing, competing, reveals a discipline that doesn't appear in photographs and can't be faked for cameras. At 18, Barron's athleticism is one of the clearest expressions of who he is beneath the famous name. It reflects commitment, competitiveness, and a willingness to be evaluated on his own terms. What Barron has finally begun to admit, and what the evidence of his entire life has been quietly building toward, is that he is his own person. This sounds simple. It is not. Growing up as the child of Donald Trump means that nearly every observer, from the most devoted supporters to the most passionate critics, has arrived at you with conclusions already formed. You are either a symbol of something admirable or a symbol of something troubling, and very rarely are you allowed to simply be a young man figuring out his life. Barron has navigated this with a level of self-possession that, frankly, most adults would struggle to match. His brief emergence into the political space in 2024, when he was initially selected as a Florida delegate to the Republican National Convention, was telling not for what it showed, but for what followed. He stepped back. He declined. Melania confirmed that prior commitments were the reason, but the broader signal was unmistakable. Barron Trump is not rushing toward the spotlight his father has occupied for decades. He is measuring every step. He is moving at his own pace, on his own terms, and toward goals that appear to be genuinely his rather than inherited expectations he feels obligated to fulfill. The question of where Barron Trump has been physically, a question that gained real traction as his freshman year at New York University unfolded in fall 2024 and into 2025, is in many ways less interesting than the question of what he has been doing. Reports from sources close to the family suggest that he has not disappeared at all. NYU operates campuses across the world, and the possibility that Barron has been pursuing his studies from a location closer to his family in Washington, D.C. reflects a deliberate choice rather than an absence. This is consistent with everything we know about how he was raised. Melania has never prioritized convention for its own sake. She chose schools for her son based on what fit him best, not what looked best in a headline. That instinct clearly continues. What those same sources describe is a young man who is not simply attending classes, but is actively engaged in building something. He has been present in family meetings. He has been exploring technology-related concepts. He has been thinking beyond the classroom in ways that suggest someone who understands that formal education, while valuable, is only one dimension of genuine preparation. His mother's own recent work on artificial intelligence and education policy has created an interesting parallel. Melania Trump, often underestimated as a political figure and frequently misread as a passive presence, has in recent years demonstrated an executive approach to her public role that surprised many observers. Barron, watching that up close, has had a front-row education in what purposeful engagement actually looks like. There is something else Barron Trump has effectively admitted, something softer and more personal than politics or business ambitions, and it is this. The relationship he has with his mother is the most defining force in his life. This was always the open secret. Melania's devotion to her son has been visible even through the carefully managed filter of public life. The choice not to hire a nanny, the move to Florida for his schooling, the delay in joining Donald Trump at the White House at the start of the first administration